Alright guys, it's paint day, and I just want to go over a couple things that you should know before you even start to paint, if you are going to paint out of a gun. Things I'd want to know if I was going to paint, and that is water in the line. So here's the air compressor I'll be using. I got permission from the shop I work at to use the booth today. So you can see this little valve right here. Most air compressors, I'm pretty sure every air compressor is going to have a valve that you can drain water out of. So getting water out of the lines is a big deal when you're painting. It's a huge pain. And you want to make sure you get it out. So go ahead and open up whatever air compressor you're using and drain that water out. The thing about air compressors is when they get warm, they actually draw water, and kind of like an air conditioning system. So you want to make sure that you're draining them. It's actually better for your air compressor anyways. We also have these lines on the outside of the booth, and they also try to catch water. I'm going to drain those. Now here is the real thing. Cam air filters. Now this is where painting gets kind of expensive, just in the filters for the system. You can get an inline filter. This is why I do a lot of rattle can at my house, because I don't have a filter system like this. I do have an inline filter, so if I do spray out of a gun at my house, I use that. It does help. You know, it's good to have something. I probably should get 2 of those at least in line. You see we got 2 right here, so these also need to be drained. Now here's my OEM bumper for the Civic. Couple things about taping. Yes, I'm gonna need to tape this off. You need to tape this grill off. And I need to tape this off. Fake fog light. One thing I would suggest when you're painting something is that you actually go on the back side of this and tape from the back. Because otherwise, if you just tape the front of it off, the paint will get everywhere that you don't tape off. It could go underneath and end up still getting some paint on the grill. And you can even see there's a hole right here. I don't know why they put that hole there. These are fake fog lights, but there is holes. So I'm gonna need to make sure that I tape off the back side of those so I don't get any paint shooting forward onto this. So that's a big deal. I'm also gonna wait to tape it off and put paper on it, because I'm gonna be wet sanding this with 800. A lot of manufacturers, when they give you body parts, they're gonna be pre-primered. This one is pre-primered. So I'm just gonna wet sand it with 800 very lightly, because I do not wanna go through the primer and have to re-primer this bumper. That's just gonna take a lot more time. The idea is to just give it a light sand, light enough to where I don't go through anything, and then it should be ready. So I'm gonna get that done first before I even start mixing paint or anything. All right guys, so here's my setup. I'm gonna use a water bottle like I was using before. Put some water on there to wet sand. And then I've got some 800 grit, and I'm using a gray pad behind it. It's not quite as much as a sanding block, just kind of soft. And I might even use the gray pad on some stuff like this, where it's like not really any flat surface, just very lightly. I mean, I'm not even putting any pressure, just doing that right there. Look at that, you can already see the scratches. So super light, guys. Do not sand through your primer and then have to re-primer your body part. It's just gonna be a headache, and then you still can't sand through the primer after you repaint it. Most paint will not stick to plastic, and that's a big deal. They actually make some stuff called like plastic, like PLAS-STIK, I believe the brand is. And if it doesn't come primered like this, you actually have to spray that stuff first before you can even primer it to paint it. So The fact that this came primered and a lot of body parts, like I said, you do not want to go through that primer. So super light sand. Make sure that you sand the flat parts first and save the corners for last. The reason you do that is because the corners sand way faster. So if you sand on the corner first, even if it doesn't go through, you still have to sand this whole area right next to that corner and risk going through what's already been sanded off right there. So you want to do the flat parts first, get your corners last. All right guys, so I got this thing sanded, and really I'd call it more of a scuff. You can still see what we call orange peel. So, I mean, if you're paying $10,000 for a paint job, they gotta sand that orange peel and get it it's glass, you know what I mean? It's glass smooth. Not really looking for that here. I'd say with painting basics, what you want is to make sure everything gets touched for adhesion purposes, because when you sand it, it actually helps the base coat, which is what I'm using today, to be adhere to the material better. And you definitely want to make sure you get things like the edges of these corners, so you get good adhesion to where it doesn't cover here and then it's flaking off on the corner. Now you got paint peeling up your bumper or something like that. So you want to make sure you get all the corners for adhesion purposes. And if you're just starting out painting, I'd say the main things you should be looking for: make sure everything is sanded, make sure that you clean it really, really well, clean it, blow it off, clean it again, even coats. You want everything to look even. I'm spraying the silver on this car, you probably saw at the beginning. So that has metallics in it, and the main thing you want with something like that is that you're getting your coats even, so you don't have a bunch of metallic here. It looks nice and shiny and metallic-y, and then here it's less so, and you can see where it's kind of blotchy, it doesn't match. So you want to make sure that you get your stuff even, and you get everything covered that needs to be covered. Like I said earlier, I need to tape this off still, and then also tape the underneath so it doesn't come through. That right there is why taping takes so long. I probably should get a word counter for how many times I say corner in this video, but corners, man. See the flat line? That didn't take very long. But obviously I'm not done here, but just getting the corners lined up, and then eventually it'll look like this. I don't want to say taping is the paint job, but it's definitely a big part of it, because the line is what you're creating with the tape. So on especially modern cars where the bumper, or the grille I should say, is part of the bumper, you got to get that taped right, and your painting could be just perfection. It could be glass, you could lay it out perfectly, you could get even coats, but if the line isn't taped correctly, then it's just is what it is. It's not going to look that great. You know, I'm using this tape right here, super thin. It's like hobby tape, same difference really. All right, so I got it all taped off. I got it taped underneath the grill so no paint will come back through. What I'm gonna do is just blow it off. Get as much dust off of it as I can. Then I'm going to wipe it down with these towels right here. Maybe worth investing to get some decent paint towels, wiping towels. These don't leave the lint behind as bad, and that's a big problem. You don't want lint, so get something good, maybe from your local paint store. You got Finish Masters, Industrial Finishes. Pretty sure both of those are nationwide. Finish Masters definitely is. So make sure you wipe it down good. I'm going to be using rubbing alcohol. I'm going to get a wet one of these towels, wipe it, and then dry it right behind it. Probably blow it off again, and then keep wiping it until I don't feel anything on this bumper, and just make sure I get into all the crevices, no lints left behind, stuff like that. All right, so I'm now going to mix my paint. I've got my mixing can right here, and it's on the scale. First color is looking for 1.5 grams. So you got to be extremely careful, because as soon as you add a little bit too much, then the whole thing is off. And you can fix it, but you have to add a little bit more of everything else and have the computer reassess that. But for most of you guys, you won't have to worry about this. Just go to your paint store and have them pre-mix for you, and then make sure that you have them shake it. Normally they do, but just double check that they shake it for you. Alright guys, if you've made it this far in the video, I'm gonna take it that you're pretty serious about getting your paint skills up. So I do apologize, it's a long video, but it's just kind of a huge crash course on painting and all the prep work it takes to get there. So what you're looking for, at least if you are spraying out of a gun, probably about 8 to 10 inches away, you got to definitely watch your speed. You don't want it to be too slow, but also it's pretty slow. I'm getting the corners here. Again, I'm saying the word corner, but you want to get all the corners first, because it's easy to spray just a 3-foot square or something like that. But what's hard is getting all the corners. So you want to spray about 8 inches away. I might have been a little far right there. Like I said, it takes a lot of time to get the feel down for this stuff. And I'm just a painter's helper, I got the permission to use the booth this weekend, but most of the time I'm just spraying some base coat and let my boss come in and spray the clear and get all that just dialed in perfectly. If the base coat has a problem, at least I got the corners for him, something like that. So this was a bit of an experiment for me too. I'm sure there's some professional painters that may want to chime in on the comments. I definitely don't think I'm a master painter. So get that clear. So I'm painting a base coat right now. So base coat, clear coat is what we are going with today. You can see right now that it's shiny. And before you can even think about laying the clear coat, you want to make sure that the base coat is dry, and the base coat will not be shiny when it is dry. Base coat is not shiny. It is more of a matte satin looking finish. So if it's shiny, then it's still wet. However, when you are painting pretty much anything, you want to spray it wet. I've seen cars come in, people claim that they've gotten a discount paint job, and now their car, they're not unhappy with it. And we had a Mustang come in, it was like a 60s Mustang, probably, I don't know, it was a 64.5 to 66. I'm not a Mustang expert, but it just kind of looked sandy. And a lot of times, amateur painters, they don't lay it on thick enough. They just kind of spray it too far back, and they're afraid of getting runs. But what you want to do is you need to lay the paint on thick enough to where it looks glassy and it looks wet. I'm not saying do that on your first coat. Don't try to get everything on your first coat. But you want it to look wet and glassy at some point, but you also don't want to get a run. So there's that in between, to where the paint looks wet, it looks smooth, it's evening out, but it's also not just running everywhere, to where obviously it's going to look bad that way. So the other thing is, make sure, especially when you're spraying metallics like this, and I'm going to show you guys the finished results, that your metallics, your coats are really going to affect the way the metallics lay out, and that's a big deal. You don't want the metallics to look blotchy on one part. I'm recording this after I've already painted it, and it did look a little bit blotchy on the passenger side, part of the bumper that meets the fender. So I didn't get my coats quite perfect. Also, if you're not planning on using a gun, you can still use all these techniques out of a rattle can. I would suggest Duplicolor. If I didn't get permission to use the booth this weekend and use the gun, the setup, all of it, I would have totally been using rattle can Duplicolor. I already found the match. Just go to their website, you can type in your VIN and get a match for your car. So Duplicolor I've had a lot of good results with. Rust-Oleum is decent. I like that Duplicolor dries faster. So you can use a lot of these techniques even with rattle can, especially the cleaning, the taping, and then making sure that your coats are even and laying it on wet enough. Now the rattle can, it's going to be single stage. The clear is in the can. You're not spraying clear over it. It's all in one. So you really just got to make sure that you lay it on wet and it looks glassy without making it drip. The other side of that is you do want to be able to lay coats, so don't try to cover the whole thing on your first coat. That is how you're going to get drip, especially like me. I'm painting a black bumper with silver, so I didn't try to cover it the whole time. You see I'm going back over again. I'm just checking. You want to catch the light. If you have a light somewhere that you can look at your paint, that's really how you see the texture of the paint. If it's looking, you know, more glassy, if it's looking sandy, you can adjust and make sure that your coats are more even. It's all about getting your coats even, so that's a big part of it. Last thing I want to talk about is temperature and flash time. So between the coats, you need to make sure that the paint is drying just enough, not all the way dry, but dry enough to where you can get another coat. Because obviously if you just spray and then go back and spray 2 seconds later, that's when you're going to start getting drips. So you want to be aware of what temperature it is. Usually between 70 and 80 degrees is ideal temperature for most paints. You usually don't want to spray in direct sunlight. It's okay to set something in the sun afterwards, maybe to let it dry a little bit, but I wouldn't leave it in the sun because that can actually dull the finish. So you want to check your what is called flash times to know when you can come back in and lay that next coat. I actually got a heater and heated this booth up beforehand, so my flash times were extremely short, probably 30 seconds between flash times, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. I would say that 2 minutes was getting maybe a little too dry between my coats. So you really want to make sure that you're aware of the temperature that you're spraying in and that you check to see where your paint is at before you lay another coat. Alright, so here I am laying the clear, and pretty much the same thing applies, everything that I just described with the base coat, but obviously you're not just going to see the color laying out. Clear is clear, it's like the gloss. So I just really want to emphasize that you got to catch the light. There's a lot of lights in the paint booth. That's the advantage of a paint booth, but get some lights and spray under them, so this way you can catch the light and see how the paint is laying out. That's the only way you're gonna know if it needs another coat, if it's looking sandy, you know, if it's looking glassy. Usually a little bit of orange peel is okay, you know, you don't need to lay it down to where it's just completely flat, but you definitely don't want it to look sandy either. When I was spraying the bumper, some of the clear was floating over and making, when I walked over to the headlights, it looked kind of sandy. So I'm like, oh, I better spray that quickly, because if that dries on there, then now I'm gonna have some sandy clear underneath the flat clear. So that's a problem. So if you are gonna spray some clear, make sure that you have a light where you can catch the texture of the clear, and then you'll know when you need to spray your next coat. Alright, so I just finished laying the clear out. Really the idea is to catch the light. You can kind of see how the clear is laying out. Pretty happy with it. A little blotchy, kind of hard to see that on camera. A little blotchy with the base coat right there. I got it pretty clean, so I don't have too many bugs in it, or nibs, or whatever you want to call them. I did see, there it is. I don't know if you guys can see that. That is kind of hard to see on camera, but there is a little hair right here. You can kind of see that little hair, and that is buried in clear already. You cannot get that out. So you might be able to wet sand that and buff it, maybe, but probably that's just in there. So, you know, after a day's worth of work, getting everything ready, still got a hair in it. So this is not a perfect paint job. There's actually a little nib right there too. You can kind of see that little black dot. I don't know what that is, a piece of hair or something. So, you know, it's not perfect. It's got a couple things in it. It just takes that one little piece of whatever to make your paint job, you know, have a flaw in it. So it's a tedious work, but I really do enjoy it. And this is pretty much what I'm doing all week other than making YouTube videos. All right guys, this is the morning after I painted this. I usually don't like to wait too long to take the tape off because you don't want it to get too stuck to the paint. So I like to peel the tape off while it's still soft, and there is a little bit of a technique to it, believe it or not. You want to pull directly opposite of where it's coming from. This way you don't have a chance of the paint lifting up with it. If you were to lift this way, you could possibly take the paint with you, and the chances of that happening increase as the paint gets harder. So I like to take the tape off while the paint is still somewhat soft. This is, it's dry, but I think paint takes a while to actually get fully hard. So I'm taking the tape off now so I don't have any peels or anything. I don't peel any paint off. So here it is. It's got a new bumper. That's those headlights. They have been cleared. And not really seeing too many sand scratches. If I wanted to make them even more perfect, I could probably hit them with like some 1000 grit and buff and polish, which is the same with the bumper. I mean, you look at this bumper clear. I mean, I laid the clear on plenty thick. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy with it. But there is orange peel, what is called orange peel, and it could be more perfect. If this was a show car, you would probably want to sand that clear with 800 or 1000, maybe 800 and then 1000, get the orange peel out, and then buff and polish that just to get it glass smooth. But the match of the car is good, so I'm happy with it. I would say there's a couple little nibs. You're not going to be able to see them on camera really. I did kind of mess up my paint line just a little bit right there. You can see that. It's a little blotchy right here. Looks clean. And then right here, a little too far. But the fortunate side of that is that the grille and the fog lights are just primered. So those actually need to be like taped off and painted black. But overall, super happy with the results. Car looks 100 times better than it did. All right guys, well thank you for watching another episode of Backyard Motorsports. Hopefully this helps you with any sort of restoration you're doing on your car, any sort of painting work or headlight work. And if you made it this far in the video and you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.